Genetic, biological and fossil evidence shows that, for over 3.5 billion years, life has evolved, diversified and changed from tiny, ocean-dwelling microbes to the millions of species that colonize all of Earth's habitable environments. This astonishing feat has been achieved by evolution. Life can be defined as a condition in which organic, animate matter is distinguished from inorganic, inanimate matter by its ability to renew its complex, hillgly ordered structure. This includes a capacity for change, growth, and reproduction, with functionality maintained until death, when its constituents disperse back into the environment. In order to maintain itself, life must be able to get energy and raw materials from the environment as well as manufacture everything necessary for growth, repair and replication. The only element that is known to form living structures is carbon, which can combine with itself and other elements, notably nitrogen, oxygen and hydrogen, to form molecules of great diversity and complexity. Four main groups of organic carbon compounds are found in living organisms: carbohydrates and fats, which supply energy, proteins, built from amino acids, which form structural tissue, and nucleic acids, the basic components of genes. Almost every cell of every living organism, from single-celled amoebas to whales, has its own set of molecular instructions. The function of each cell is encoded in chromosomes, the thread-like part of a cell that carries hereditary information in the form of genes. Each human cell contains between 20,000 and 25,000 genes, each with its own set of instructions responsible for particular characteristics. The code is recorded mainly in the form of a molecule called DNA, which includes chemicals called bases arranged in pairs. A gene is encoded by a specific sequence of base pairs. Evolution is a scientific theory that states that plants and animals change genetically over time, modifying and adapting over generations in response to the demands of Earth's changing environments. This biological process includes reproduction, diversification and adaptation. Charles Darwin, who formulated his theory of natural selection in 1839, called the process descent with modification, the descent from a common ancestor with the modification of biological characteristics over time. Natural selection is a key evolutionary process, brought about by the survival of organisms best suited to their local environments, the survival of the fittest. Evolution is fueled primarily by the processes of selection and competition. These act upon species, which respond by having offspring that contain inherited variations. Most species tend to produce more offspring than can survive. Natural selection favors and promotes the survival of the fittest, those best adapted to the physical and biological environment, such as a particular climate or escaping a predator. These survivors select other, similarly adapted mates to produce offspring that survive in greater numbers to breed new generations. Without adaptability, life would never have moved out of the ocean. However, even adaptability is largely a result of cause and effect. Life cannot predict a future need. Instead, new traits are produced in individuals by genetic variation and mutation. If these are favorable, natural selection promotes their transmission to future generations. For instance, flight in pterosaurs and bats, based on a membrane stretched between from fingers, may have originated as an adaptation to glide away from predators which themselves later became adapted to powered flight. The fossil record shows that, throughout Earth's history, species have evolved and died out. The majority of species that have evolved and died out. The majority of species that have evolved are now extinct, but their genes survive in living descendants. Speciation is the process by which new species evolve from an ancestral species, and it can be brought about in a number of ways. For example, environmental change can fragment populations, leading to geographical and genetic isolation of different groups. Over time, genetic variations and adaptations to new circumstances alter the gene pool of these groups to such an extent that even if they did come together again, members of different groups would not be able to breed and produce fertile young because they would have evolved into separate species. Additionally, various regional and global environmental catastrophes have impacted upon life and resulted in mass extinctions. The largest of these, at the end of the Permian times, caused 96% of all species on Earth to die out, and yet life recovered. Where two or more species interact over a long period, the possibility of mutually beneficial adaptation (OT coevolution) arises. For example, flowering plants develop a flower with colored petals to attract insects, which then cross-pollinate and fertilize the plants, so that the plants produce seeds. The form of different flower species have co-evolved to accommodate specific insects and less frequently, birds. In addition, the evolution of various attractive, nutritious, fleshy berries and fruits has led different birds and fruit-eating mammals to develop feeding habits that utilize such resources. The benefit to the plant is that its seeds pass through the gut of the consumer unharmed and are distributed in droppings of natural fertilizer. Animals as diverse as whales, snakes and ostriches are all essentially tetrapods, four-limbed creatures, descended from a land-living ancestor that used its limbs for walking. Over time, they have all adapted to very different lifestyles and habitats, with radical modifications of their appendages and bodies. The whale's forelimbs have become paddles for swimming and steering, while the hind limbs have been lost altogether, although vestiges of the pelvic girdle remain. By losing all four limbs, snakes have adapted to a different mode of movement, throwing the body into S-shaped curves and using the friction of scales to move forward. Finally, the flightless ostrich is descended from a flying bird, which had forelimbs modified into wings. Such loss of original limbs is termed a reversal in evolution. Having flown onto the islands of Réunion and Mauritius in the Indian Ocean, the dodo, a relative of the pigeons, underwent a reversal of evolution and lost its ability to fly. With no natural predators, this plant eater thrived, until humans arrived in the 1590s, hunting it to extinction in less than 100 years. Genetic changes that lead to the creation of a new species are known as microevolution. Changes in higher-level taxonomics groups and their patterns of evolution are termed macroevolution. For instance, the small-scale changes separating house sparrow populations or the herring gull from the lesser black-backed gull, which share a common ancestor, are microevolutionary. The changes that occurred between mammals such as sea lions and their remote, egg-laying ancestors, however, are macroevolutionary. Sea lions are aquatic mammals, but they give birth to live young on land and suckle them with milk. The platypus is a monotreme, the most ancient order of mammals. It has a duck-like bill and lays eggs. It also suckles its young with milk. Over 99.99% of all species that ever lived are extinct because life has evolved for over 3.5 billion years, and species rarely survive beyond a few tens of millions of years. For 3 billion years, life meant microscopic marine organisms. It only moved into freshwater and onto land 470 million years ago, and not until 300 million years ago were plants able to colonize dry uplands. Whole groups of organisms have evolved and become extinct, some in mass extinction events. Fossils reveal a pattern of rapid bursts of evolution, dispersal and extinction, sometimes with waves of evolving populations replacing one another as well as gradual background evolutionary change. Evolutionary innovations have allowed new niches and allowed newly evolving groups to diversify into them. Additionally, climate change, changing sea levels, extensive volcanism, and plate movements have all affected evolution at different times in different places.